everybody, welcome back to Unlimited Commander. I'm Adam, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Matt. Matt, how's it going?
You know, it's going okay. I finished up Breath of the Wild for my charity streams this past week on Sunday, and it reminded me of something that I hadn't thought about in a long time. So, for my last stream, our good friend Light happened to stop in, and Light kept me company through the whole thing. Like, we found a couple of diaries that we hadn't read. I read them out and had fun. We talked about lore and stuff. Light has never played through Breath of the Wild, is planning to get Tears of the Kingdom. So just sat and chilled and like listened to me rant on about all this lore. We ended up, after the game was over, we watched a trailer for the new one, and I got to talk a little bit about some theories and some things that I saw that people aren't necessarily talking about on their channels. And it reminded me of when I was young. I used to have these two friends that we'd hang out all the time. And for like 6 years straight, every summer, we would play through Earthbound all the way through. And it was just us hanging out in the same guy's house every year for like 3 weeks straight, listening to like Savage Garden and They Might Be Giants and all this stuff, and just playing through Earthbound like it was brand new, like we'd never seen it before, even though we all had. And it just reminded me that like how much having a friend nearby enhances the enjoyment of even something like a one-player game. Like, I don't even have to be the one playing it, and that's part of the reason these Twitch streams turn out so successful, is that there's something beneficial about having someone there experiencing it with you, even if they're not actually holding the controller. As long as they are enjoying the engagement, you're enjoying the engagement of it. It adds so much to that moment. And so
I agree. I think back to, and Earthbound is a hilarious example, actually. My childhood best friend and we would routinely, actually what we would do is set up two TVs side by side, and we'd be playing different things. But Earthbound was one that was constantly in our repertoire as well. And this particular individual is known for replaying ancient games all the time. I would say that I don't know a single person on the planet that has played Final Fantasy 1 for the original Nintendo more than him.
Wow. That's a lot.
Almost annually, much in the same as yourself, but to date. And we are on the last year of not having another 0 on our age. And so my grades tell you that the first number is not that small either. And still to date, I bet you I could text him right now and be like, when did you last play Final Fantasy 1? And it will be within the last 6 months.
Yeah. And that's what's wild about it. Like I attempted to continue to do it after we stopped doing it. Like, I took a break during college, and then after college I got a Wii U and got the Earthbound's Beginning and Earthbound pack. And I still played through it. I still had fun. I did that for 2 or 3 years in a row. But like, it just, without someone there experiencing it with me, it wasn't quite as fun. So I ended up dropping off on it.
Yeah, agreed.
What about you? How's the weekend been?
My weekend was busy, a lot on the go. One of my niece's birthday is actually today recording, but we got together this weekend to celebrate her 6th birthday. She's a little cutie. But also, and I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be jealous, I played my cube and paper this weekend.
It's so awesome. How'd it go?
Sorry? It actually
I am jealous,
really
but
good.
that's okay.
I know. It went really good, actually. I lost count of how many cards, but over the course of the last couple weeks with the release of March of the Machine and a couple other things, I hadn't really gotten into, like All Will Be One or very lightly with Brothers War. So there's like 3 sets, give or take, that I hadn't really looked at. Did some decent modifications to the thing overall, dropped basically the entire partner mechanic that I had in there, and started just like fleshing out some other stuff. Slammed some battles in there. I think I'm up to 6 battles or 7 battles in the cube. And it went really good. I drafted Miram Sentinel Worm, which went pretty decent. Also saw decks for what is that guy's name? Tyam or Tyjam?
Yeah.
Ojatai Master.
Yeah. Tigum, I think, is the way that I usually
Oh, maybe
pronounce
that's
it.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll go with that. So Tygam, Ojatai Master, Corlessa. I was actually, it was the first time, there was two of us both fighting over the Simic Dragons while I was trying to get the Teamer Dragons going. But they still actually ended up with a solid deck. And also Gave Guru of Spores. So it was a really nice spread. Yeah, that one went. That was the main competition. I ended up taking it just at the end there because I ended up getting a couple things valued. There was I had Miram out and I got Terror of the Peaks out and Ganax, the one that gives you a treasure when you play a dragon.
Yeah, that's Ganax. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had two Ganaxes, two Terror of the Peaks, and a Miram out, and it was hard to overcome. But Gave really gave a run for the money. Even in like a limited cube environment, I was still staring down about 25 Saprolings. It was a good time.
Jeez, I'm really glad to hear that though, because when you were talking back and forth with me about changes you want to make to your cube, we talked about Tygam a lot as a particular thing to give a shot, and we were like on the same page of like, if we want this to happen, you've got to do XYZ to the rest of the cube to make it happen. And if someone decided to give it a shot, then that means that it worked. The changes were.
Yeah. And their game didn't go as well as planned, but it's mostly because they weren't getting the instants and sorceries at a consistent space. I think they drafted well. But it just was that it wasn't giving the deck wasn't giving what it needed at the time it needed it. So like their game didn't go as well, but they still managed to draft a decent deck out of it. Also, because we only played 4-person in paper, and we may or may not have discussed it on the cast, but the rule set that I have in place about when playing with 4 people is to double the number of packs but burn the last half of each pack. So we draft with like 18 cards in a pack, and then when I was playing with 4, we did the thing. So we made 6 packs, we drafted the first 9 cards out of each one, and then just burned the rest. And that went really good, because then everybody still got to see a full set of packs instead of just like we're all drafting out of like the 3 packs we have, and there's only 4 people. So, like you're going to end up with less consistency because you're taking a lot more picks that you don't want, right? You're stuck with cards that are off color that people aren't picking and stuff. Yeah. So that worked really well. And if anybody has any questions about how I set that up, please hit us on the socials or the comments, and I will do my best to tell you why I did it and how I did it.
All right, Adam, what are we doing today?
Oh, you threw it to me, which is good because it's probably better that I preface this. So last night, after my stream ended, we went and raided into actually my relative, I guess, technically, a close friend of ours, Snooze Button TV. Shout out to you. I know you're listening. She's one of our most devoted listeners, actually. And
much appreciated.
Much appreciated. And she hit us with an idea as soon as we got in for a podcast idea, and we got really excited about it and decided to put it into play right now, especially since, like, as we were in her chat, and I immediately dawned on me that this was a fabulous idea. What we're going to do today is we're going to take one of my commander decks. Now, I know that we do often stay in a limited space if we can, but like we're also a commander podcast and we're a couple of friends. And what we're going to do is we're going to take one of my decks, and I sent the list over to Matt, and Matt is going to look through the list, and Matt is going to tear apart my deck and make me justify the choices I've made in my deck, so that we can, I think the goal of this is going to be showing everybody that there's no right or wrong answer, especially in like commander or any sort of thing where you're constructing it yourself. I guess there's no right or wrong answer, but also that each individual has their own philosophy that they follow when building decks, and that each one can be right. And so we're going to take this apart. We're going to show, and honestly, I'm really excited because the deck that we're going to showcase today is my Rith the Awakener deck. This deck is my first commander deck, and when I say that, I don't mean like it's my first in my heart and my head, although it kind of is. This is actually my first commander deck I ever built in like 2010, and I've been working on it kind of over time. And when we first got into, or when I first came back to Magic in like the Return to Ravnica era, and I took a look at my commander deck specifically, I still had this built and sitting in a box, but it was designed for 2012 Commander, and 2016 Commander was way different, way different. And I spent like a good few years looking through it and trying to get it figured out in a way that I could continue to play it in today's space as things sped up and stuff like that. So it's undergone a good number of changes. And so we're going to look at some of those changes. I'm not identifying what was changed. That's up to you. But you're going to look through, you're going to tear it apart, and you're going to make me justify my choices in a playful and fun manner, in a way that hopefully everybody can see how somebody might go around building a deck and philosophizing about these cards.
I can only hope. But before I get too deep into it, though, I do want to go over what we talked about deck building philosophy, because I think I hit it pretty squarely on when we were talking a little bit before the thing went, which is one of the big differences in the way that Adam and I approach Commander is that Adam often really likes like high value commanders, the kind of commanders that you could very easily break if you wanted to. If you look at a lot of the more recent decks that we've seen Joda come up. We saw a new shoulder deck today that I had never seen before. Even like Nethroi, which a lot of people don't play, but is very, very easy to bust. These are like high value commanders. Shorkai is one of Adam's favorite decks to play. Also, though, his goal, since he's playing these high value commanders, is often to restrict the deck building process in order to bring them down to the level of which he feels like everybody is playing at. So when we go through decks and we're looking at things, a lot of times the answer is not to put in a better card, because if you simply just look at it as this card is strictly better than this card, then you're taking away from the philosophy of, I don't want to blow out the table. I just want to play the commander I want to play and be able to sit at the table with the people that we play with. My philosophy with deck building is I start with either really, really bad commanders or suboptimal commanders and then bring them up to fit a table and do stuff. Or I pick a broken commander, make a broken deck, and then I only play that with people who are playing broken decks. So that's why all of my choices end up looking like they are pushing into optimal range, because that is the way that I generally build when I'm building decks. Overall, this is a pretty like solid deck build, even in the way that I build decks, because you can tell that this has had the number of years behind it that it does, because there's quite a few cards in it that are like, this isn't the most optimal choice, but this is the choice that you make when you are trying to get as much in as what this deck is trying to do. And this deck is trying to really overrun with tokens, right?
That's the idea, yeah. So Rith the Awakener, which I will read just because I love it so much. Rith the Awakener as a 3 red, green, white legendary creature dragon, 6/6 with flying, and it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 2 and a green. If you do, choose a color, put a 1/1 green sapperling creature token into play for each permanent of that color. So this commander specifically, if you're to just play the card, wants to come out, punch somebody, and then it counts everybody's permanents, by the way. Mm-hmm. It's not just like my permanents of that color. It looks at the entire table. So if I'm playing, I've actually done colors that weren't in my color grouping. Say somebody was playing a lot of black zombies, and I would say, okay, I choose black, and then it counts all the permanents of that color, and then it puts that many 1/1s in. That's Rith.
Yeah.
And then the idea being that like I try my best to put as many creatures onto the battlefield as possible and either just swing in with them if possible with the various anthems and game enders, or incremental damage with things like impact tremors and Perforos, God of the Forge, to just kind of like as I'm building them lower life totals just to make it easier to get to the end. That's my deck.
Absolutely. Okay. So yeah, and to that point is pretty much where it wants to be. So let's start talking about specific cards. And I'm gonna just kind of be jumping around. I'm gonna do my best to kind of keep things in each section as we go along it, because I have ADD and I've got to do something
Join the
to
club,
try
friend.
to pull myself out. ADHD is a hell of a drug. Anyway,
Hell of a drug.
So you'll see a little bit of bouncing around. Just stick with me. Trust me, the process works. I want to start in the ramp column.
Sure.
In particular, I would like to talk about sort of the disparities between the various things here that bug me. In particular, Jaheira, Friend of the Forest. Okay, 2 and a green for 2/3. Tokens you have tapped to add a green. It also has choose background. That's not important for what we're doing right now. So I understand why this is in here. This is a way to generate even more mana when you are when you need more stuff to do, but you have plenty of tokens to add to the situation, right? My question, and I know that this is a strictly better card, but this is a good question on it. Why is this not just Cryptolith, right?
For the most part, because I don't have a Cryptolith, right?
That is actually totally fair.
I will, and this might preface a couple of these things as we're looking through, and you ask questions. It might come up, and I will try my best to not just fall back on this in certain circumstances. But I just never got one. I wasn't playing during Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I go to look at it, it's like a $10 to $15 card, and then I'm like, meh. And then I just happened to crack a Jaheira, and I was like, hey, that looks great, and we're gonna try it out. And
right.
I actually haven't played this card yet, if I'm being honest. Like, I actually don't know how well it does in the deck, so maybe it was actually like a bum play anyway.
I mean, I can talk from my experience if you want to know. I tried Jaheira in a Jetmir deck, which is essentially the same idea. Lots of tokens go vroom vroom right fast. Mm-hmm. I almost never played it, and I had it in my hand several times to play it, and I never played it. And I think it's because of the way our brains are wired in terms of what we consider to be optimal good play. And we kind of talked about this last night when we were on stream doing Sealed, but it's like you'd rather do something than nothing on a turn, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're on turn 3 or turn 2 and you have 3 mana and you have Jaheira and you have nothing else, then you're probably going to play Jaheira. But if you have literally anything else that you can play at that mana base based on the rest of your pool, you're not going to play Jaheira. It's just not. It's not going to be the first thing to come to mind because anything else in the deck hits that same spot. Mm-hmm. My personal take on Cryptolith Right. Cryptolith Right is a busted card. Just so that I mentioned it to the to people, so in case they don't know what it is, it's an enchantment. It's 1 and a green, so it costs 1 less. And creatures you control have add 1 mana of any color. So you don't only get green, and you can use your non-token creatures. So like strictly better update. There's a reason why it is $10 to $15, right?
Yeah. I actually didn't until just right now because I had ordered one. I ordered some singles from March of the Machine, and they haven't shown up yet, but they're coming. And one of the ones that I picked up that's probably going to slot in there because I just think it's going to be neat. I'm going to put in Wand of the World Soul, which is 2 and a white for an artifact that says tap, add a white, or tap the next spell you cast has Convoke.
That's awesome.
I think that's going to be a better one in here. And I bought it and I was like, I don't know what I want to do with this. It's ordered, it's on the mail, and I think this is where it's going to slot in, and it's probably going to go where Jaheira is, because I haven't played Jaheira, and like, if I'm being honest, I wasn't super sold, and I think Jaheira would do better in some sort of like mono green type deal anyway.
Yeah, she goes in some kind of like either mono green or even like 2-color X green type thing, like what's her name, Lathril. Like,
I can see Lathril being good.
It's a pretty decent place for her. But yeah, no, I think Wand of the World Soul is going to be great in that slot, because it's functionally the same idea, but the idea of it giving Convoke instead means that all of your color choices are taken care of. You're still in the 2 and a blank category, mana value 3. So if you're trying to keep within the same like brutality of mana value, you've got that fix. And it means I don't have to suggest that people play Cryptolith right, so that I don't have to fight Cryptolith right as often.
Well, and the stupid part is it is good. And one that you won't see in this deck specifically, because I did pull it, much to my own chagrin, is for a long, long time, I was running Mana Reflection in this deck, which is green, and 4. And it says, whenever you tap a permanent for mana, it adds twice that much mana. Mm-hmm. And I found that things like that are lightning rods. People think you're real scary when, again, I'm still just playing one. That took me from 1 spell to 2 spells, right? Like, this deck doesn't. And if you look through, and again, we'll put all the links in the show notes and stuff, and I'll do my best to show on screen. But looking through this deck, it's a hungry friggin' deck. The Commander's 6 mana. Several of the Enders are 7 or 8 mana. There's some of the token generators are 5 or 6 mana. Like, it's a hungry deck. Mm-hmm. And when you put down a Mana Reflection, everybody goes, oh my God, he's going to combo out. And I'm like, with what? You know, like, I'm going to play 2 spells instead. And then we're still going to just like watch me generate some tokens. But like, until I get a big number, like what do you call that? Mass.
Critical mass.
Critical mass, that's the one.
Yeah.
Until I get a critical mass, I'm not really going to like poke at anybody, because otherwise I need like all the blockers I can, because they're all a bunch of 1/1s. Mm-hmm. So looking at stuff like Mana Reflection, it just painted a target and was a like lightning rod for removal, and I spent 6 mana to do nothing.
Okay.
So, you know, some of this stuff, like Cryptolith Right, is going to be like that too. You're going to pay like 3 mana or whatever. I think it's 1 and a green, or green and 2 for Cryptolith Right, or 1 and 2, 1 and a green.
It's 1 and a green, yeah.
1 and a green. So for 2 mana, I'm going to put it down, and then everybody's going to think I'm real scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so good to get away from that. And since we are talking about 5 mana do nothings that paint a target on your back, Mirari's Wake is in this deck.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to explain why, because I do actually understand why. Mirari's Wake is a 3 a green and a white. Creatures you control get +1/+1, so it's an anthem. And whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced to your mana pool. So it doubles your mana on land, making it ramp and making it an anthem, which on paper sounds really, really good. But this is one of those lightning bolt cards that we were just talking about. Because in reality, casting 5 mana to get this additional anthem and this additional doubling effect is not generally that good. It's going to do work, but only in the sense of raising you from casting 1 spell a turn to 2 spells a turn, right? Like, it is not generally very good in this kind of deck, because you just don't need that extra much mana. Like, you're not going to storm off with it. But your opponents are going to see it and go like, well, I can't kill the Mirari's Wake, so I've got to kill the player so that the Mirari's Wake doesn't end up destroying me. So
I will say on this one, it's actually it's gonna blow your mind. You ready for this?
Yeah.
It doesn't get near as much hate as Mana Reflection.
No, I believe that actually.
it's wild how different these two cards are perceived. And so I had them both in here, like, again, for years and years and years. So
Mm-hmm.
part of it is, and I will admit, part of it is like the inability to bring myself to cut both at once.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is that it's not as scary as the other one, so people tend to leave it. Like, they'll see it and they'll be like, "Oh, Mirari's Wake." But here's the thing: is it doesn't double like Mana Reflection, because Mana Reflection said any permanent,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't straight up double. It says add one of the that land produced. So your bounce lands make 3 instead of 2 instead of 4. And
Yes.
your mana dorks don't tap for double, just your lands.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, stuff like that does temper it. And also, as you had said earlier about, like, I try not to go too hard on the table. I could easily put 10 or 12 cards in here off the top of our head if we just said, what goes better in this slot? You and I would come up with a ton of crap
Mm-hmm.
that is better than this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of those things that, like, keeps this from being ridiculous, especially if you look through the rest of the deck list and you see some of the, like, ridiculous value stuff that I do still allow myself. I am like a dieter when it comes to my commander decks. I try my best not to overindulge, but I allow myself some indulgences, right?
Oh, sure. I was thinking of a card that is actually worse for the deck, but I think gets a little less hate than this card. And you've gotten very lucky that you've been able to play with people and they go, "Oh, Mirari's Wake, okay." Because in my experience with it, whenever I get a Mirari's Wake on the board, they're just like, "No, don't do it." So I guess if you are getting the reactions you're getting, then you're cool. If you want to try something that's a little different, I was thinking Unnatural Growth.
It's 1 and 4 green.
1 and 4 green. So still 5 cost, very green heavy in comparison to Mirari's Wake. Does not give you a ramp elements. So unfortunately, it is pulling away from your current available ramp. But in a deck where you have so many anthems and so many other things going on, it basically replaces one piece of ramp with an additional finisher that is still in that sort of 5 mana do nothing category that people won't really have an opportunity to complain about.
So, like, I see where you're coming from on that. I will say that this particular slot in my mind has always been reserved for ramp.
Mm-hmm.
I have actually, I don't even know how many I have actually removed, but my anthem category used to be much more swole, and it actually, like, slowed me down too much. Not in the slowed me down where, like, now I'm up, I'm not as big a problem, but, like, where I was struggling to actually play the game and struggling to have my deck do the thing because I was having too many sit there do nothing things, and then, like, I had 2 really awesome Saprolings.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, and I wasn't getting enough on the board to actually, like, enjoy the game. So, like, if I was to slot this out, I don't consider it, and that's why, and you see it, but maybe the viewers don't, but if you look on the list, it's slotted under the ramp category because in my mind, it's a ramp card with upside. The anthem is less important. It fits the theme really good with, like, a little bit of ramp and a little bit of buff. But if I was to actually pull this out, like I did with Mana Reflection, it would be for another acceleration rather than another buff.
Understandably so. And, like, that's the thing for me is that, like, if I were going to find a ramp choice, I'm sure I could pour through some cards and find something that I'd find in the spot. My entire questioning on it comes from the fact that it does fit both slots, and I think if it fit one slot a little bit better, either one of those slots a little bit better, you could just treat it as that one. It would take less heat, and you'd also pretty much get what you want out of it. So I don't know, maybe something like Dictative Karametra. Just as a spitball, I don't know for sure. Like, there's tons of ways that you could go about it, but that's the one I was thinking.
it's an excellent find out of this list, and I can see why it raises question. And I think that like part of it is our mutual, or sorry, like our mutually exclusive experiences
Yeah.
with this card. Because, and maybe that's part of it too, is that like dropping this particular one does raise eyebrows. I'm not saying that like when I put this down, everybody's like, oh well, it's just a Mari's Wake, no big deal. It's just that usually, especially when I'm just generating a bunch of 1/1s, it doesn't seem to hit as hard with people as if it was to be like a mana doubler, because they've watched it. Like it's turn, I don't know, let's say on a good game, it's what, turn 3?
Yeah.
And then and then turn 4, I'm putting down Rith 2 turns early or something like that. Like it's not like it's the end of the world in this deck, and maybe that's where people are seeing it. So maybe I've just been blessed with good threat assessment, where they look at it and they're like, hey, that's a problem. But also, for that same 5 mana, Buddy over there has a Grave Pact, and maybe we should care about that more.
Yeah, somebody played an Exquisite Blood, and we're about to get comboed out, so we might need to do that instead.
I'm holding this Disenchant. Where does it go? Mirari's Wake is over there. Hold up. Hold up. And I will also say that like my years of experience with this deck have me maybe holding that for a second or two longer than, you know, somebody who saw it in there and was like, I'm going to accelerate super fast. I know it's a Lightning Rod, and I know it's a 5 mana do nothing. And so like I maybe temper it a little bit so that it's not turn 5 it comes down. I do some other things, and then like turn 7 I maybe drop it so that like turn 8 I can win.
Right, exactly.
So I know what kind of card I'm looking at when I have it in my hand, and maybe that's part of it. I'm not saying that like it's the best play, and you're right. There's so, as far as like do nothings go, this deck is full of do nothings.
Yeah, and and that's the thing, is that like I'm trying to avoid using words like better cards, because I know that is a philosophy situation for me.
Fair enough.
That is part of the problem.
We have gotten better at it. And I know that that's not what we're intending. And like, I think that's why I prefaced it earlier too, is that we know there are better cards for almost every one of these slots. You don't see a Mana Crypt in my deck. You don't see, you know exactly. what I mean? Like, you don't see any of the free spells. This particular one would benefit from a couple of. I don't think that there's anything as strictly better in Commander, as long as you're trying to do the thing, which is have fun with your friends, drink beer, and eat tapas.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to hold you to task for it, because also we play other formats. And so like the term exists.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean more along the lines of, when we are trying to find replacements, I'm not going to try to go for the card that automatically optimizes better. I want to go for a card that either does something similar but takes the heat off of you, or does something better so that it finishes that game plan that you want overall. Okay, so I do have, I wanted to stay mostly out of lands, because we talked a little bit about it beforehand, but essentially the thing about lands is you're either running super optimally lands or you're not, and there's no like, we could go into detail on whether or not you run Jungle Shrine versus, I don't know, another shock land or battle bomb land or whatever, to try to make sure that it comes in untapped. We could do that all day, and we wouldn't get anywhere. We know what's going on there. It's either you're choosing to run as optimal land force as you can, or you're not. Maybe you don't have them around. Maybe you do, and you just don't want to use them. It doesn't matter. I do have one land I want an explanation on. And it sounds bad, but you know what? Gaffney Township is in here.
Heck yeah!
Why? So hold on real quick. Gaffney Township, for the people, it's a land. No, it's not basic, obviously. It taps for a colorless, or you can pay 2 a white, a blue, and tap to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I understand that making a bunch of little tokens stronger is a good thing. I am not saying that is not a good thing. How often is Gaffney Township the make or break on whether or not you push in for lethal or anything other than you need one more turn to do stuff?
Like never?
Okay. So
I don't have that answer for you, friend.
tell me about Gavin Township.
Like, it looks real cool. Like, I don't think I've ever actually fired it off in any sort of like recent memory. I'm pretty sure it just exists there because one day it's going to happen. And it's going to be the sweetest day of my life.
Can't wait.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. I mean, and it's usually a pretty hungry deck, as I said. 4 spare mana doesn't come very often. 5, actually. 5 spare mana.
5 spare mana, because you got to keep that up.
And, like, just to put them on there and then get immediately board wiped is a distinct possibility. Like, I got nothing, man.
You know what's also funny about that? We were just talking about Mirari's Wake. It doesn't make extra mana with Mirari's Wake because it produces colorless and... never mind. Mirari's Wake specifically says any type, so it will make colorless mana. Okay, but there are other boosts like that only do colored mana, and I was just like, oh no, it doesn't even work with that. Okay, that's the only reason I had to do it because Gavin Township. I love Gavin.
It's gonna happen one day, and I'm gonna wreck your face with it. It's gonna be great.
I cannot wait for 2032 when you finally.
Oh, it's gonna be great.
I'm
gonna look at you square across the table and be like, "Hey, Matt, activate Gavin Township, swing for lethal," and you're gonna be like, "No,
Matt. Thank God that you haven't updated this Chun-Li deck in the last 7 years, so that I can finally do this to you."
It's gonna be great.
Okay. That was just for me, folks. I hope you enjoyed that.
On a slightly more serious note, you should have seen the pile of like not synergistic lands that I did actually cut that I used to have in here. I made mention about how I had previously had like man lands in here. Those lands from most notably Zendikar that you can animate into a creature. You know what? Also, it's foil. I cracked a foil in Innistrad when I was playing, and it fit the theme pretty good, and it went in there.
Now, you and I have talked about this off camera, but I'm going to make you explain it on camera for people. Battle for Bredegard
is a piece of junk magic card.
So bad. 1, a green and a white. It's an enchantment saga. First step is create a 1/1 human warrior. Second step is create a 1/1 green elf warrior. And then the third step says choose any number of artifact tokens and or creature tokens you control with different names. For each of them, create a token that's a copy of it. Adam, why? Tell me why.
So, you know when you're opening packs of a set, say you get a box, and you always have that one piece of junk rare that you open like 8 of. Do you know this feeling? I know this deeply because I have several of these. Battle for Bredegard was Libby's. Libby opened like 8 of these stupid things over all the different packs of Kaldheim we opened over the course of the last like year and a half. And like, cause we like opening packs. We've talked about this a number of times, and like buy singles, but also like opening packs is fun. And so Libby is swimming in Battle for Bredegard. And I says, you know what? Fine. If you're going to have that many and it's this big of a thorn in your side, I will take one and I will put it in a deck. And it's not a good card. It's not. To further cement just how not good it is, there's one in the cube. Libby drafted it, and she was the one playing Gave Guru of Spores. The warrior came first. She sacrificed the warrior. The elf came second, and then she had a sapperling. And then with Battle for Bredegard, it actually did fire off, and she got 2 tokens.
How many things do we know that cost 3 mana and create 2 tokens?
Oh, endless. Was it Raise the Alarm? Molten Rebirth?
Before anybody who's a Battle for Bredegard stan gets up in the comments, I'm sure there's a deck that you can make that it's not nearly as terrible as it is for literally any other deck that might run it. But
I don't think they can.
I don't want to see your list. I don't care.
I don't think they can. I have given perhaps one of the best shining examples where this card has a fighting frickin' chance. And it's still a piece of junk.
It's still pretty bad.
it's a piece of junk that means something to Libby and I.
It's true.
And I am never going to cut it as much as I want to because it's not very good. And so this is what we say when we say like play bad cards and play whatever you want. And this is like a shining example. I'm glad you pointed it out. I know we talk about it off camera all the time at numerous occasions, but this is one of the shining examples of deck building philosophy. And I know you're not calling it out and telling me that I should pull it because I think that the story is enough that like you're going to be like, no, that card,
the story is so worth it. It's so worth it. Here's a card that I actually don't want to talk too much about, but is another one of those cards that inevitably gets brought up. Moving into the Enders, we have a Titanic Ultimatum. Titanic Ultimatum, just for people out there who don't know, red, green, white. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +5/+5, gain first strike, lifelink, and trample. Now, I'm not going to make Adam defend this. I'm going to defend this, okay? And I'll tell you why. When I first started playing, I was on, or started playing for real, I was on the tail end of the Alara block. And this card is cool. It's fun to do. It's not the best ender. The best ender is in here. Craterhoof is in here. So the best ender already exists. Titanic Ultimatum is not the best ender, but it feels really good to play. And when you are playing in a deck that makes as much mana in whatever colors as it wants as a token deck can, especially when we get Wand of the World Soul in here instead of thing. Titanic Ultimatum is as much of a finisher as any other card. And it feels so good to play. It feels really good to play ultimatums because they cost so much. They're so weird. They do a bunch of stuff. And each one individually on paper is not generally that powerful. Because unless you're playing like hard control or mega ramp, you're never going to get to cast this card.
Basically, honestly, like I've tried so many of them, but Titanic Ultimatum is a story maker. And I think that's why, like, I'm never going to cut it. And I know that's why you're defending it also. Like, when you can get a card that for, like, sure, 7 mana is a whole bunch. Its colors are all over the place. And, like, is 5/5 and trample and first strike and lifelink and all that other stuff really any better than just, like, 3/3 and trample with an overrun for 5 mana? No, it's not. But when you end the game with 650 life because you still decided to take the time to add up all the lifelink of everything that you just like ruined everybody's face with, and you know, you look down at all your creatures and you say, okay, I finished this game with like 20 creatures and they were all 7/7s, 8/8s, and like I wrecked your face and now I've got this giant life total, and you're like, yeah, and I did it for 7 mana and it was stupid. Those are the ones that you're like going to look back on, because the story I'm telling right now is from 12 years ago.
Right.
Sitting at the bar that was like right next door to the LGS that I used to work at, that after we closed up shop, we'd go over to the bar, and you know what we did? You're going to love this. We drank beer and ate tapas.
There you go.
It was a tapas bar, and so we'd order weird beers and order little plates of tapas that we would all share. And then I windmill slammed this onto the table and I ruined everybody's faces, and I ended up with 650 life. These are the story makers. These are the ones that are going to like keep you coming back to the game, and you don't have to cut these because they suck. My philosophy is I'd rather drink beer and eat tapas with my friends.
Those cards being said, I do want to talk just for a moment about Akroma's Will. Akroma's Will, 3 and a white, choose one. If you control your commander, choose both. First one is creatures you control get flying, vigilance, double strike until end of turn. Second one is creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn. Akroma's Will is a very good card, but in my mind, I'm seeing it as a very boring play pattern. And I don't know how you feel about that. Have you had instances with Akroma's Will where like you feel like you truly got somebody with it, or that you got a good story out of Akroma's Will itself?
So, okay. I'm going to tell someone else's story because I actually don't. This card is not like, it's newer than most games I've played with this deck, which is actually kind of easy to do. But I haven't played Akroma's Will personally.
Okay.
However, I do have a story that I was playing in paper in real life people times. Libby and Snooze and Amplitude and myself were sitting down and we were playing. And Amp was playing Darien, King, like not King Darien, but Darien, the one that makes like 1/1s whenever stuff doesn't take damage or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so and Amp had built like this very tight pillow fort, and Snooze was actually playing Rin and Ciri Inseparable, and she just amassed this army, and she went to swing, and she goes Akroma's Will, and got him for 147, decimated all of his defenses.
There you go. It happens. It does happen. Me personally, in that spot in a Rith deck, again, Unnatural Growth is a pretty funny something that I feel like is going to be more of a story card rather than it just being like, I charged in an Akroma's Will in game.
So my brain works in such a way where I can only put it into one category. It only goes in one pile because that's just the way I think. When I have cards in a deck and I say I need like 10 of I want 10 of this effect, I put 10 of those in. If there's a card that does something better elsewhere, but still tertiarily fills that slot, I will not apply it to this other pile. So, but I still know that it does these things. And one of the reasons why I chose Akroma's Will is how susceptible this deck is to a board wipe. The Indestructible is a big part of why this is in there.
Yeah, I am curious on that note. And obviously that is a good excuse because, I mean, I would never tell you to take out Heroic Intervention, right? And so in the same note, Akroma's Will kind of fits that thing. And again, that's my experience. Usually when I'm playing token decks, the only board wipes that people ever have exile everything as opposed to destroy them. So I don't get to save them with things like Akroma's Will and Heroic Intervention.
So like, but to your point though, this is kind of like you had mentioned earlier. This is one of those moments where I do find that I would rather like get blown out because I'm trying to like run at a certain rate, and if I get blown out by a farewell, then I got blown out.
It happens. What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? But like, Tef's Protection is just better at that thing, even better than Heroic, right? Like I would actually probably scrap Heroic to put into Fairy's Protection and keep Akroma's Will, because I would rather have the deck still operate in like that middle space than to just put in all of the 2 mana don't touch me effects.
Okay, so since we're running late, there's still at least one more big thing I want to talk about. So I'm going to go through something real quick, and I'm just going to name a bunch of cards that I think would be better off being something else. And after I name all of them, I expect that you're just going to say no. And we'll move on from there.
It's quite possible.
Okay.
I am like this. Let's go.
So here we go. The cards I'm looking at: Akroma's Memorial, Hammer of Perforos, True Conviction, and where was the one in creatures? Nayali's Sun's Vanguard. So those are the 4 cards that I just say make something else.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No. Okay. So I used to have a lot more, and I don't want to get rid of all of them because it kind of is how I like to play the deck. Right? Give a bunch of creatures, buff them up with like neat things.
And I'm not saying don't play them, like don't replace them with anthems. I'm saying replace them with anthems that feel, well, I don't know, that feel better to me. Whatever that means, right? like honestly, that's all that means. Like I keep bringing up Unnatural Growth, and like, so my thought on Unnatural Growth, like versus say Akroma's Memorial, which is one of the ones that I mentioned, right? Akroma's Memorial is 7 cost. Creatures you control get flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black and from red. That's huge. It's basically a finisher. You know, like it's almost an ender. And it has the ender cost to prove it of 7 mana. I just feel like with the number of anthems and other boosts that you're running in the deck to make your creatures bigger, doubling their power and toughness during combat and giving them trample until end of combat is essentially going to do the same thing 9 times out of 10. Only it costs 2 less mana at the cost of costing 4 green, which your deck makes plenty of. And to your opponent, they will be much more hard pressed to waste a kill spell, waste a destroy spell on unnatural growth over a Chroma's Memorial, which will just kill them if they let you swing in with it.
And like to that point, like it's always a struggle I've had with this deck of like the balance of game enders and anthems and stuff versus like the generation. Because like if you could end up with like a bunch of 1/1s that are all stuck at 1/1, then you don't get very far. Because I don't play anything that sacrifices them for value. I don't play anything that transforms them or polymorphs them. I don't play much of that. This is just like put a big pile of critters on the board and then like either, like we said, with like the Witty Roastmaster and Impact Tremors and stuff, just whittle some of them down, or in like really awesome cases, I get 25 of them and everybody dies. Cool. Right. Or I swing with them. That's the way I want the deck to play. And so things like buffs and anthems and stuff are kind of how I like the deck to go. I do know that it's a tight rope to walk with number of anthems and quality of anthems and stuff like that. These that remain, to the exception of Ginny Faye, because that one's new, but everything else that's in this pile, this is half the size of what it used to be. And like I recognized, especially when I came back, because this deck was an older deck, a slower deck. It was a different time back then. Clouds. So like looking at the pile of these anthems, I recognize that like it's a big pile. Most decks want 1 or 2, maybe 3 on the top end. I've experienced. I've cut so many, and I just don't know how to like keep the deck in the way that I want the deck to play without getting rid of all of them and just like putting in more token generators. And it's my personal trial. It's my I'm Sisyphus rolling this stupid like Rith rock up the hill, and then the anthems keep rolling it down.
Yeah. I mean the only thing that you could really do if you wanted to like keep the flavor of those big hits and run more consistent things would be replacing the anthems with cards like the ones we were talking about before, like Overrun, Overwhelming Stampede, and those kind of things. That way you're still getting in that big hit energy, but you're only needing to use them the one time that they're useful and be done with it, and not put them into creatures that will, or into artifacts and enchantments that just paint a target on your back if you don't have enough tokens to get the job done, right?
Yeah.
So
like, and I recognize it's a problem, but like a Chroma's Memorial would not be my first cut, but like looking at things like True Conviction is a little bit do nothing, I know, but like Cathar's Crusade is like an algebra lesson whenever you cast things, and I know that like that's one that I maybe like I just don't want to play, but like similarly to some of the other ones, like I'm loath to get rid of that one because I cracked a foil of it, and now that foil is like $40 for no reason, right? Like, so like looking at some of these, some of it is like a materialistic attachment to some of them, and like other ones are like a Chroma's Memorial just makes me smile. I think that's some of it. Like it's a good card, it's a great card, but like cutting it feels dirty. Even though I know that like there's probably something that I would probably enjoy more. And like if I was to look at something like Unnatural Growth, that might be the slot. Right? It's simpler. True Conviction does scare people, but it's really like not that much different than Unnatural Growth, and it's you know, like the lifelink I guess is kind of problematic, but I mean, don't attack me then.
I think it's pretty much it's a similar slot. It's just something that you won't see coming back on a win so often. It'll be something that you play to win, not something that you play to protect yourself from losing.
Mhm.
which is what I feel true conviction does. It's like I can't seem to get any of these attacks in, so I'll just make sure everything I have has double strike and lifelink, and now no one will want to attack me while I figure out what to do, which
Mhm.
is not a bad thing to have. It's not a bad thing to break yourself out of parity or to put yourself into parity when you're losing. But ultimately that's not the way that I tend to build. Like I don't want to be stuck in a position where anytime I do that to people, I always apologize because I'm like, oh, I have now created a board state in which you can't win and I can't lose, but I'm also not winning.
So like I can see in some of like the way we build differently, I think
Mhm.
that's part of it too. Like when I slam down true conviction as a don't touch me, like it's only one turn or maybe two turns away from where I'm actually in a position.
Exactly.
Because like the idea, especially in this deck, like hopefully I can pop out a couple more generators, or I get in with Rith one time and then I make 10 or 20 Saprolings, and then next turn a bunch of 2/2 double strikers are coming at your face.
Yeah.
So like but I can see like it's a don't touch me, but not quite in the prison effect. Like you can still swing at me.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be good for you.
Yeah. And for me it's seeing things as how functionally is it like prison to the point where it feels like a prison card, right? And so it depends on. I think that just depends on the person, right? I do want to talk about these last three cards because we've got a bunch left to probably talk about in that moment. The last three cards I want to talk about are the ones that are marked under damage. That's Impact Tremors, Perforos God of the Forge, and Witty Roastmaster. They all essentially do the same thing. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage to each opponent. Impact Tremors and Witty Roastmaster deal 1 damage to each opponent. Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent. On top of Perforos having sort of a fire-breathing effect for everyone, and can also become a 6/5 indestructible creature. I really like cards like this. I like these damage cards. You've played against my Scooby Gang deck. You know that runs the ones that do this except for artifacts.
Ingenious Artillerist, etc.
Yeah, Ingenious Artillerist and things like that. Warstorm Surge, while not being quite as good because it doesn't hit as each person, has the benefit of being able to hit any target. So you're able to like kill creatures and stuff with it and things like that. I guess my question is why 3? Because 3 seems like just low enough that you're never going to get more than one of them on the board per game. And at 1 per game, do they really affect the mass total of damage that you do enough to be worth throwing in?
Maybe this was like, I guess, a response to the way that when this was originally built versus what exists now, the format did care about incremental value.
And I think incremental value still has its place, but I think we see it more often in decks that are dedicated to it at this point. We were talking earlier about last night I played against a Dina deck, and the Dina deck was draining 5 or 6 every turn. It was super annoying and really hard to deal with. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I'm going to show this little graph that I built to the people who are watching on things. But when I talked about parity and losing and winning, there's this general consensus that if you could be winning a game or losing a game, but there's also 2 sets of states where you're in parity. It's that you're either like you've pulled yourself up from losing or you've pulled yourself down from winning, or someone has pulled you down from winning. And
the quadrant theory?
Yeah, quadrant theory. Yeah. So when you're looking at cards, you should be figuring out what they do for you in each set of circumstances. Can a card that is pulling you from losing into parity also pull you from parity into winning? If not, then maybe there's a problem. If there's a card that you're playing that actively pushes you from winning into parity, probably don't, right? Those kind of things. And I think that these 3 damage cards are always good into pushing you from losing directly into winning, right? Like they don't hit the parity aspect of things, because they don't affect the board on an axis that makes it like even to what you're doing, right? Either you're losing and you're still losing, you're winning and you're still winning, or you're winning more. Every once in a while, it can take you directly from losing directly into winning. But that's only if you have a critical mass of those effects on the board, so that every time you're playing a creature, you're punishing your opponents for quite a bit of damage, right? And that's why the format doesn't like house them in small pieces anymore, and why they end up just being like full-on combo decks essentially.
Yeah, like, so I've only ever slammed down a couple, like had one out, and you're right. Mm-hmm. But I guess in my experience, and that's all I can really go off of, because I can see this being parity of like decent board states to winning. Mm-hmm. I don't think it'll take you from losing to parity. It can't. Yeah. Because you need to already have a board state for these to work. Mm-hmm. But I can also see it taking from parity to have won, or from winning to finishing.
Mm-hmm. Like I would never tell you to pull Perforos, because Perforos like is just a value engine all the way around. It's like if you happen to have extra mana during one of your attacks, great. Fire breathe all your creatures. It always deals damage to things, and it being a 6/5 indestructible at some point during the game is pretty boss. All of those things are good. My main thing when I'm thinking about these three cards is I would either like to see more of them and the deck have sort of a shift, like an actual stance on I want to do this damage, like this incremental damage is important and useful to me, or I'd rather see you take those other two slots and put them toward things that you actually want your deck to be doing. I don't know if that's like a copy this deck, make changes to add that in for a while and see what you think kind of thing. But it's something interesting to me, because I just think at three of them, you're statistically not going to hit them often enough to figure out whether or not you like that ability, because there's just not enough of them in there.
You're right in that it would be a different deck.
Yeah.
If this was to be like copied, moved over, and then see what we can do in that, but it would be a different deck entirely. And I don't know that that's where I would personally like this deck to go. Mm-hmm. Like I think I'm actually all right with how the deck plays with this many. I guess that's where I'm coming around to.
That's good.
Like when you're saying like, you know, it could do more if there were more of these, or just like take them out. Like I like them, but I don't know that I want it to be like the focus, but I didn't like how little there were when it was just Perforos. Mm-hmm.
Good. I mean, that tells you something, right? So it's just like, it's a question of, do you push more or not? But again, that's another deck, and probably for another time.
Agreed. So gang, this has been Matt tearing apart my deck and making me defend my choices. Stay tuned in coming episodes for when I do the exact same thing back, because tit for tat, friend.
That's right.
And I'm super looking forward to it, but it's going to be really interesting to see how we're different on these, because we are probably going to still line up on some stuff and then disagree on others. And it's going to be really interesting when I take apart one of yours and make you defend some of your choices in the way that you're going to have much more where it's like, this is a very good card, and I don't think I'm going to find a better slot for it, as opposed to mine where I'm like, it's pretty.
Mm-hmm. We'll be able to talk through that, and then we'll get into the philosophies behind the way that we start building decks on that one too, because there's something we didn't talk about in this one that I'll keep for the next one that values that.
Keep them coming back, friends. And you can catch more of this and all sorts of other fun stuff on the next episode of Unlimited Commander. Thanks very much for coming. Have a great time.
Bye.
If you liked what we had to say, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support goes directly to growing and improving the show.
You can also like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Make sure to comment or leave a review. The cast can also be found on Twitter at Unlimited Commander.
You can find Matt's Twitch, Twitter, and other YouTube projects at knowledgepoolmtg.com.
And Adam can be found on Twitch and Twitter at Adamus_Prime86.
Our theme song is Polaroid by Harris Heller, licensed by Creative Commons.